I think the movie that people were maybe most surprised to see not end up in the top 3 for People's Choice was the next film from Jason Reitman, Saturday Night. This one, as we've talked about previously on Intercut, is the story behind the moments leading up to the premiere of the first episode of Saturday Night Live. This is a story told essentially in real time leading up to that 11:30 October 11th, 1975 premiere. It has a really excellent ensemble of actors. Yeah.
It's literally the 90 minutes going into it.
Well, I mean, that's why I'm excited for it, but that's why they're releasing it for October
11th for the 50-year anniversary,
cool.
or 49-year anniversary, I guess. Yeah, I mean, it's got a really excellent collection of young actors. Gabriella Bell is playing young Lorne Michaels. Cooper Hoffman is really playing a young Dick Ebersol. You have Dylan O'Brien doing a pretty uncanny Dan Aykroyd impression. To me, the standout amongst them... Yeah, the standout amongst them was Corey Michael Smith, who you might recognize from May December, doing an uncanny Chevy Chase. Like, it is a really spot-on Chevy Chase. And
it took me a minute. It took a minute to be like, oh, you guys didn't, that's not actually just stock footage of archive footage of Chevy Chase. Yeah. That's a person. Okay. Oh, shit.
It's pretty incredibly well done. And the movie has this real kinetic energy. Like, there's a fun chaos to it in the ways that I was really hoping for, as you know, as they struggle to sort of figure out how this is all going to come together and whether or not they'll make it in time with competing interests and all these personalities to wrangle. It has this sort of momentum to it and energy that I think makes it really fun. The cast is really having a great time with it. It's a very funny movie. There's certain elements to it where I don't know if the story feels like a full story, and in many ways it's intentionally not, because this is the thing that led up to the start of SNL. It's not the arc of SNL, right? Yeah. So there's some ways in which I'm not sure how good of a movie this is, but it is a movie that I really enjoyed and had a great time watching and am eager to see again. So I had fun with it. Amanda, I know you also really enjoyed Saturday Night.
Yeah, I did really have a lot of fun with this one. I almost feel like, just to kind of speaking to the idea that it doesn't necessarily feel like a full movie in some ways, it almost feels like the perfect pilot episode. Like, you go into a series after this of kind of like the continued, you know, build up of how you get there. It does still work as they make sure there's an arc. They make sure that you're going through it. And then there's like the moment where it might not happen. Somebody having like the come to Jesus talk with Lorne, being like, you have to be realistic here as to why this is happening. And if you bomb this, like, that's it. But it's really fun, really strong. They do give it's so chaotic that you just have people kind of like working out different skits in the halls at all time, because at this point he still thinks he can fit in like literally 60 different things into this 90 minutes until they kind of really curate it down to what you end up getting. I know some people said that if you have no love for that original SNL cast, like, you wouldn't care about this, but I've never seen an entire episode of SNL in my life, so I certainly haven't seen any SNL from the opening days when it was just called Saturday Night. And I liked it a lot. Like, yeah, there were some skits that like they're laughing there, and I'm like, see, I wouldn't laugh at that now, but I guess back then maybe you would laugh at that, and it would make sense that that's funny. And I think that might be the only area where it's a little bit weaker, in that like when they're not doing the skits, it's funnier than a lot of the skits. I think there's one joke, the guy he picks up from the bar, I can't remember his name, he writes the Chevy Chase character a joke, and that was funny as hell. But outside that, I'm like, okay, everything outside the actual show is funnier than the show that we're supposed to believe was so good that it was undeniable. But that's just comedy changing over the eras, in sketch and skit comedy just changing. But I feel like that's probably going to be the bigger complaint that some people have. But it's just a fun movie, and it feels breezy. And
there's some stuff in there too with how they end up using the true to life elements that I think if you're, you know, maybe if you're not necessarily like an SNL historian, they'll be interesting and they'll be, you know, they'll remind you of stuff. I'm sure there's a lot that's kind of apocryphal, and just the way that they kind of push everything into this condensed timeline. There's a lot of stuff that definitely feels heightened specifically for the movie. I know there's people who have some issues with the portrayal of Jim Belushi and the portrayal of Jim Henson in this movie. But I think it's even if it's not necessarily like a historically accurate document, there's something that's sort of spiritually true to it and to the nature of SNL. So like I don't know if this is, I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of people who point out all the historical inaccuracies, and ultimately I don't think they matter that much because I think the movie does a good job of evoking the feeling that we get from an iconic show like SNL and like what SNL represents to a lot of people.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
I would say with the Jim Henson thing is probably just kind of making him like a hippy dippy butt of the joke a little bit. But as far as I'm aware, that might have been accurate. I don't know. So.
Also, what was the answer to that? Because remember he got double billed with Kaufman?
Yeah.
They just have him playing two roles. There's no greater reason for it. He's just Nick Braun is just playing both Jim Henson and Andy Kaufman some reason.
And it works?
To the points, it does. Yeah. And so for some people were literally like, was that Andy Kaufman making a joke pretending to be Jim Henson? And I was like, no, that was he was just playing two people.
Yeah, they ever in the same room at the same time?
No. So maybe. It's the kind of thing where if you weren't familiar with Nick Braun as an actor, you might not even notice it.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Because one of them has like a big accent and one of them just kind of has like the hippy dippy, more Nick Braun. He's more noticeable. I don't know. I noticed, but I could see some people maybe not.
Mm-hmm. So not up there with 30 Rock, but still an interesting take on.
I would say that it probably lands like smack dab in the middle. If you just kind of like condensed all of 30 Rock into one amorphous thing, it's probably on par with it. But I would say it's better than it's better than when 30 Rock's at its weakest, and I don't think it's that far off of 30 Rock at its best necessarily. Like, I thought it was pretty.
Ooh. Zach's a shooter for 30 Rock. You gotta be careful.
I love 30 Rock.
And I do love 30 Rock. Yeah, but
to me, it lands somewhere between 30 Rock and Studio 60, and I say that as somebody who doesn't hate Studio 60 because it does have a little bit more of the like taking itself seriously and the weightiness around the importance of making this happen. There's also an interesting thing in that they cast a lot of these actors younger than their real life counterparts were at this time, and I think it's done sort of to emphasize that this is like it's not just about the show, but about a new generation taking over television. And that aspect of it is really interesting, too. We got a couple questions in the live stream. Ace Zach Reviews asked, how was Rachel Sennett? Feel like I hear nothing about her in it. It's not the splashiest role, particularly. I think that's partially why you're not necessarily hearing much about her in it. She is...
I liked her in it, but...
Yeah, she's good in it, and it's also cool because it's not necessarily the typical Rachel Sennett part. She's a bit more soft-spoken and kinder than I think her characters normally get portrayed as. She plays, I forget the person's name.
Schuster.
Rosie Schuster.
Rosie Schuster, who is Lorne Michaels' wife.
Technically, it's one of those things. Technically, Lorne Michaels' wife.
Or at least was at the time.
Yeah, it was at the time, but even then it was a little bit weird. I think Caitlin actually said it best in that like Rachel has this undeniable Gen Z quality that always comes through in some of her line delivery, so she probably feels the least authentic to the time, but it's still good. They let her have this nice running bit where she's kind of like gaffing at people as she's walking through, and that was really fun. So she does a lot. She's kind of like an emotional ringer in the movie for Lauren's character.
Yeah, she's also like a bit of a counterbalance in that there's a lot of like cynicism and negativity flowing around the building, and she's the opposite in a lot of ways. So it's an interesting part, even if it's not like one of the 5 or 6 most interesting in the movie.
She was second billed in the movie. She's second billed in the movie.
Yeah,
right underneath Gabriel. Is she the second person that appears on screen, though? Is she the second person that appears on screen?
Yeah, I mean, Letterboxd got her on the first line here.
That's the other weird thing, because they say that the cast or the credits are in order of appearance, but they are absolutely not in order of appearance. Maybe they still need to move them around a little bit. But my number 9, I'm going to put Saturday Night. I have a feeling it's going to show up a bit later on at least one of these lists.
It's my number 8, so we could transition right into that from there.
Amanda, how high up is it on yours?
7.
Okay, so I think we could talk a little bit about it now.
We'll go.
Saturday Night. I mean, I think this is one of the more hotly anticipated films of
Definitely.
the festival, telling the lead up to the premiere of the first episode of Saturday Night Live, following Lorne Michaels and the cast of characters as they scramble to make it live to air. And it's a really fun, kinetic movie from Jason Reitman. We talked about it a bit on our recap, but we haven't heard from Chase. So, Chase, what stood out to you about Saturday Night?
Well, when I first walked out, I was like, that's a good movie. I was at a 3 out of 5. But then the more I sat with it, I was like, damn, I did laugh a lot. Damn, there's some clever little things in here. So I did give it the little bump to the 3.5 because I do think if this is an Oscar contender, this is going to be the fun Oscar contender that you could kind of throw on for anybody. I am not a Saturday Night Live fan. I've never watched a full episode. So I just kind of went in knowing a couple of the big names, and that's kind of it. And I think this is a hard movie. It seems like a lot of people, the reaction at TIFF, came out really disappointed with it. I didn't have the highest expectations for it. I just kind of expected a fun movie. And I got a pretty damn fun movie. You know, there's a lot of fun performances in here. The guy that plays Chevy Chase, I thought it was the AI deepfake technology. It
literally
was
at the
uncanny.
end, when his name pops up, my brain was like, oh my God, right, that wasn't actually Chevy Chase.
Yeah, like this guy crushed it.
Corey Michael Smith.
Yeah, he's incredible in the movie. It feels one for one. I love the look of this movie. It feels authentic to the time. I love how the movie's pretty much 90 minutes and it's following a consistent 90-minute timeline. This is definitely one of the most fast-paced movies of TIFF. I felt like I was in there for an hour. And when you're at a film festival watching almost 40 movies, you know, you love a movie that feels super quick. And you're like, oh, shit, I could go get food now. This is awesome. Yeah, just really, really solid. It probably won't make my top 10 of the overall year. But as I'm looking back on my TIFF experience, it's definitely one I'm excited to go back to the theater in a few weeks with my girlfriend and my friends and stuff like that and just laugh a lot because there's a lot of funny performances in here for sure.
Very, very fun. Yeah, I just liked how dynamic it all felt. Like it is just like this really fun, sparky thing where you're technically really just following, for the most part, always Lorne. Every once in a while, there's another character. Like there is a whole scene where you're just following with Rachel Sennett's Rosie Schuster.
Yeah.
And just kind of going through, and that's a really fun little scene. But it doesn't feel, sometimes when you have movies that are paced that way, it almost feels like annoying because it's never letting up for anything. But this does make the time for the story beats, some good emotional moments. I think it's paced incredibly well for what it is. I do think some of it may suffer that, like, when the movie itself is funnier than the SNL skits that they're performing that we're supposed to believe
True.
blew it up. But it's just because the eras are different, comedy is different, but like they're cracking jokes to me that were funnier than what built an empire in SNL. But that's okay. That's just a different time. I'm like Chase. I've never seen a full episode of SNL. I think I only saw a bunch of skits like 2 years ago because people wanted me to go through a bunch of them on stream one day. So I have no familiarity with this at all and still had just such a good time with it. I just think it's a really solid movie. It's got really good style. It felt good to the era and a lot of really strong performances.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some aspects to the way that the story develops that I ultimately maybe felt like a little bit let down by. I feel like it sort of, it doesn't have like the kind of arc you expect from a movie. It sort of is like build and then end in a way. But like ultimately, I don't know if that prevented me from having a really good time because, as you mentioned, Amanda, like it's really just got this kinetic energy to it. It just flows. It just moves. It doesn't really. It doesn't. It's not doing so much to get you lost, but it is doing enough to constantly be throwing these new things at you. And it is a film that's pretty full of gags, whether it's the gags that are explicit references to the gags from the show, or just these new gags that they've thrown in and little references to celebrities that showed up or were stopping by, and all these bits to just sort of explore all of that. And you know, there's probably elements of it that are a bit apocryphal or not really that true to exactly how things happened, but I think it all just sort of works to give you kind of like this spinning plates carnival act kind of feel to it. So it's a really entertaining time. And even if I maybe am not, completely sold on the movie, it is one of the films from TIFF that I'm probably most looking forward to watching again, just because it's entertaining and full of good performances. And I think that goes a long way.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Blackberry thing. Like, we all walked out of Blackberry really enjoying it, probably more than this, I would say, but it's really rewatchable. Like, out of that South by Southwest, I've watched like Bottoms and Blackberry more than anything, and this kind of has that same kind of vibe of like, it's going to be so easy just to pop on whatever you're doing and still enjoy it.
Absolutely.
And I gotta say, the Jim Henson jokes crushed me the most out of everything in the movie.
So
everything Muppet related, I was dying at. So
yeah, I did find out apparently it was supposed to be Benny Safdie playing Kaufman, and he couldn't make it very, very last minute, and that's why there's somebody playing two characters, to the point that someone thought that was a bit.
I gotta be honest, I didn't realize he was playing two different characters. Like, now that I watched the trailer after I saw the movie, and then I caught it, but in the moment, I definitely had no idea. So
the accent didn't give it away?
No, I also never watched New Girl. Is that what he's on? Is that the
Succession?
No, he's Succession.
Oh wait, really?
He's Greg.
Nick Braun?
Okay, yeah, I haven't seen Succession yet either, so I might have to leave this podcast.
That's fair. That's fair.
All right, so Saturday night, really entertaining time.